On the news, Southern Kaduna community says 518 indigents killed in 5 years. President Buhari reappoints Dabiri Erewa as NIDCOM chair, seeks confirmation of appointment of 6 federal commissioners. And NLC threatens to create Hall of Shame for corrupt judges. Welcome to News Now on TV 360 Nigeria. I am Simisola Adigun. The Atiap Community Development Association in Zangon Kataf local government area of Kaduna State has said that no fewer than 518 people have been killed by armed herdsmen in various attacks on communities in the local government in the past 5 years. Speaking at a briefing in Samaro Kataf after a peaceful protest, the president of ACDA, Samuel Achi, accused the military personnel deployed to the area of bias and not doing enough to stop the incessant attacks that have displaced about 20 communities and thousands of residents. He also demanded the immediate removal of the sector commander of Operation Safe Haven, Brigadier General Timothy Oporum, whom he accused of being biased and distorting the real facts about the killings. To speak more on this insecurity situation in Kaduna State and country in general is security expert Salahuddin Hashim. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, the people of Southern Kaduna have accused the military of not doing enough to stop the attacks. Generally, with the rise of killings and insecurity in the country, will you not say that the military have not upheld their duty to protect and safeguard lives and property? Okay, so if you heard me, I asked the people of Southern Kaduna, have accused the military of not doing enough, to stop the attacks. Generally, with the rise in killings and insecurity in the country in general, would you say that the military have not upheld their duty to protect and safeguard lives and property?
Thank you very much for having me. I think there's a crisis of policing in Southern Kaduna, and this crisis in itself has actually thrown up a number of challenges that has actually put the policing framework under serious scrutiny. Despite various efforts and interventions by states to be able to provide both military intervention, provide policing, securitization effort has arguably become quite challenging, and it is constantly on the decline. And of course, for me, it is a case of a concern to begin to interrogate whether it is a case of the military being overwhelming, to have been overwhelmed, or basically because of a non-willingness, or because of the capacity gap, or because of the issue of capability. Because it is very important to put very clearly that the outgoing administration has put in quite a lot of effort in terms of platforms and hardware, but where the challenge and the gap really lies is why hasn't this actually translated into proactive military assault on those who perpetrate and bring some level of harm in citizens' way. And this has also further created some level of perception about state government unwillingness to protect that particular region because of the issue that borders around the political conversation on whether or not the particular region has the government in mind. But one thing that came out very clearly is that the unending violence in that particular region has become more reactive in terms of response from security agencies rather than something that is very proactive. And this has continued to increase the challenges of favoring or the need to overhaul the security sector generally, or that there is a challenge with the unending chains of violence, which also provides this conspiracy of the rabbit hole with the unending violence situation that we have seen. That number is mammoth, and it is actually very staggering, and it's something that calls for serious concern. And I think it is high time for every form of
especially in the communities
related
facing
to the issues of
constant attacks
to be brought to the conversation, so that at least we can have some kind of sustainable peace.
All right. Now, for the people of Kaduna State, especially in the communities facing constant attacks, would you say that with the new governor, there will be a fresh start and new ideas on how to put an end to the killings?
Yeah, I think the Southern Kaduna people also must learn to do one thing in particular, one, to create an inclusive approach to engage in the conversation. SOCAPU, the Southern Kaduna People's Union, is actually not a faith-based organization. It is actually a regional organization for the entire people in that region. But one thing that has actually happened as a challenge and a setback is that SOCAPU has actually become more of a faith-based organization, and they have actually used the prison of faith and religion and ethnicity to actually look at this conversation, and it has continued to narrow and undermine their approach to dealing with issues. So in doing things differently, they must actually see that as regional efforts by everyone, both faith, both every ethnic group, living in that particular region, to be a participant in the solution. Two is to set agenda for the new administration in terms of how to engage issues differently. What are the items that must be put on the table? What are the new considerations? And all of these things must actually be the kind of conversation they must have regionally. But doing things differently, they must actually put every effort together to ensure that they engage it frontally, not as a faith-based organization, but as a regional entity that want to have a region that is peaceful, that is actually sustainable, and of course, that can live in harmony.
Well then, thank you very much, security expert Salaudeen Hashim. Many thanks for speaking to us. Moving on, President Muhammadu Buhari has reappointed Abike Dabiri-Erewa for a second term as the chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM. The notice of her reappointment was contained in a letter written by the President to the Senate, requesting the upper chamber of the National Assembly to confirm her reappointment.
Dear distinguished Senate President, the appointment of Honorable Dr. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, OON, as Chairman CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, for a second term. In accordance with the provisions of Section 2, Subsection 2 of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission Establishment Act 2017, I write forward the name of Honorable Dr. Abike Dabiri-Erewa as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission for confirmation by the Senate for a second and final term.
President Buhari also wrote a separate letter to the Senate seeking the confirmation of the appointment of 6 federal commissioners of the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission to fill the existing vacancies in the states.
Dear distinguished Senate President, confirmation of appointment of 6 federal commissioners for Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission. In accordance with the provision of Section 154, Subsection 1, Section 154, Subsection 1 of 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, I am pleased to forward for confirmation by the Senate the appointment of 6 unlisted nominees as federal commissioners to fill the existing vacancies of their respective states in the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission. Their CVs are attached herewith. The names are 1. Senator Ayobu Eze, CON, Enugu State, Federal Commissioner. 2. Peter Opara, Imo State, Federal Commissioner. 3. Hawa Umar Aliyu, Jigawa State, Federal Commissioner. 4. Rakia Tanko Ayuba Haruna, Kebbi State, Federal Commissioner. 5. Ismaila Mohammed Agaka, Kwara State, Federal Commissioner. 6. Kolawale Daniel Abimbola, Oyo State, Federal Commissioner. It is my hope that the Senate will consider and confirm the nominees in the usual expeditious manner.
The Nigeria Labour Congress has threatened to establish a hall of shame for judges who undermine the principles of the judiciary and make frivolous judgment on election petitions. NLC President Joe Ajaero made the threat in Abuja during a press conference organized by the Labour and Civil Society Front. Ajaero emphasized the need to rescue the judiciary, adding that the Labour Union will hold the judiciary accountable for its actions. On her part, the co-convener, Labour and Civil Society Front, Nkoyo Toyo, urged Nigerians to be hopeful that the judges handling the 2023 presidential election petition would be fair and just.
The judiciary has so many questions to answer. If they fail to answer those questions within a short time, we will create a hall of shame for those judges that come up with such judgments. And that will happen soon. There is need for the NBA, for all arms in the judiciary, the bar benchers, and all to speak out on what is happening in the judiciary. Without whether judiciary is still the last hope of the common man.
It is in the light of this hope that we are calling on all Nigerians to believe again. Not in INEC, not in the executive, but in the judiciary. And give the judiciary the benefit of doubt. In the same vein, we are calling on the justices of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court to rise up to the occasion by restoring the people's confidence in the processes that were abused by INEC and thereby stem the decline of our democracy.
To urge the judiciary to ensure that in reaching their decision, they abide by the provisions of our Constitution and indeed the Electoral Act 2022. Interestingly, we believe, and we're not preempting the justices, we believe that they will do right. We believe that they will ensure that non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act and the electoral guidelines as provided or enunciated by INEC will vitiate what appears commonly seen as a flawed election.
A coalition of South-South youths and stakeholders have described as appropriate and fitting the call for the emergence of Godswill Akpabio as the president of the 10th Senate. The chairman of the forum, Legboshi Yamabana, while briefing journalists in Abuja, said the overwhelming support was based on consideration of federal character in the zoning of the 10th Senate leadership, bearing in mind competence and credibility with an understanding that the country is a secular state, adding that Akpabio ticks all the right boxes which qualify him above any other for the position.
For the sake of inclusion and national integration in mainstream governance, and in line with the spirit and principle of federal character, we are appealing to stakeholders to support the South-South, whose last and only shot at the Senate presidency was in 1979, when Joseph Wires was elected under President Shehu Shagari. We want to assure the president-elect that an Akpabio's Senate presidency will ensure healthy, friction-free, mutually benefited relationship between the National Assembly and the federal government under his leadership. That our collectively endorsed candidates, Senator Akpabio is experienced, equipped, and a ranking senator with deep understanding of legislative procedures and processes clearly shows him as the square personality for this square responsibility.
We'll take a break here, but still to come. United Nations says civilians facing catastrophe as over 100,000 flee fighting in Sudan. Details of the story and more right after this break. Welcome back. Here's a recap of our top stories. The Atiap Community Development Association in the Zango-Kataf local government area of Kaduna State has said that no fewer than 518 people have been killed by armed herdsmen in various attacks on communities in the local government in the past 5 years. Speaking at a briefing in Samaro, Kataf after a peaceful protest, the president of the ACDA, Samuel Achi, also accused the military personnel deployed to the area of bias and not doing enough to stop the incessant attacks that have displaced about 20 communities and thousands of residents. We also told you that President Muhammadu Buhari has reappointed Abike Dabiri-Rewa for a second term as the chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM. The notice of her reappointment was contained in a letter written by the president to the Senate requesting the upper chamber of the National Assembly to confirm her reappointment. President Buhari also wrote a separate letter to the Senate seeking the confirmation of the appointment of 6 federal commissioners of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission to fill the existing vacancies in the states. Now, in case you missed any of our news bulletins or for more updates, you can catch us on Limex World TV or log on to our website on www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also follow us on our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram and YouTube at TV360 Nigeria. On Facebook, we're at TV360 Online. The Biden administration is set to end COVID vaccination requirements for federal employees and international air travelers on May 11, the White House has revealed. The requirement will be dropped the same day the administration says it will end the public health emergency tied to the coronavirus pandemic. The administration will also end vaccination requirements it had put in place for international air travelers as part of its effort to curb the spread of new variant of the coronavirus. The new travel rules mean international air travelers who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents will no longer need to be fully vaccinated before they fly to the U.S. We'll take another short break and return with more stories. Do stay with us.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On Digi 360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians have said in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DG360, dissecting the issues.
Welcome back. Folashade Ogunrinde is on standby with what's new in the world of business. Folashade, over to you.
Well, many thanks to Ms. Salah. And in business, aviation unions have suspended their proposed strike following a meeting with officials of the Ministry of Aviation. The aviation unions made this known in a statement jointly signed by the secretaries of the Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, the National Association of Aircraft Pilots and Engineers, the Association of Nigeria Aviation Professionals, Amalgamated Union of Public Corporation, and the Civil Service Technical and Recreational Services Employees. The statement said the unions were considering the overall interests of the aviation industry in the country and as such have taken a decision to await the outcome of the meeting slated for May the 9th. We'll take a short break here and be back with a review of the stock market. Just stay with us. After the May Day holidays, the market resumed activities but finished weak as the bears dominated the market, leaving market capitalization at the 28 trillion naira mark. Now, in the aggregate, 108 listed equities participated in trading, ending with 28 gainers and 25 losers. Now, speaking of losers, Geregu came out last with an end-of-day price appreciation of 10% at 219 naira 70 kobo per share, followed by Transcorp Nigeria. Now, on the winners chart, we see that Union Bank Nigeria led the gainers with 10% share price appreciation, closing at 7 naira 70 kobo per share. Now, at the end of today's trading session, a total of 418 million volumes of shares valued at 4.7 billion naira exchange hands in 6,249 deals. Now, compared with previous NGX trading day on Friday, today's data shows 11% decline in volume, but 12% improvement in deals. A look now into how some of our select global stocks performed. Well, it's a mixed trading day for FTSE, Dow Jones and Nikkei, apart from Asian stock Nikkei, which ended in the greens at 0.12%. We see that FTSE and US Dow Jones had a rough trading day. Now, while shares in two regional US banks have been pursed amid fresh concerns about the health of the financial sector. Overall gains in the UK's blue chip index were erased by weaknesses in energy stocks. And that's it on business news and stock market review. Back to you, Simi, for the rest of the news.
Thank you very much, Folashade, for the update. And in Sudan, millions of people are facing a humanitarian disaster as the armed conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, becomes a full-blown catastrophe. The United Nations, in a briefing, said more than 100,000 people have fled Sudan since heavy fighting broke out between rival forces on April the 15th. A further 334,000 people have been displaced within Sudan. The country's health ministry has also said about 500 people have been killed and more than 4,000 have been wounded in the fighting. Well, to speak on the ongoing fighting in Sudan, Majdullin El-Haj El-Tahir, expert on Sudanese geopolitics and advocate for democracy and human rights, joins me now. Many thanks for joining me. Now, it's been 2 weeks of continuous fighting in Sudan. Even with the ceasefire negotiations, foreign countries have begun evacuating their citizens. Now, what do you make of this whole situation?
Good evening. This whole situation is a very tragic one. The fighting in Khartoum is very heavy. The two parties have declared several times that there is a period of a number of hours of ceasefire, to which they both of them systematically violate their very own agreement. And what they do is that they use this kind of declarations of ceasefire as a means of military tactic in order to regroup and attack each other and so on. In the meantime, Khartoum, which is normally a town, a city with between 8 to 10 million people, there are millions of people trapped in who cannot leave their houses at all. They cannot leave the inside of their houses. They can't go outside in the yard of their houses. Hospitals are collapsing. There are very severe food shortages and water shortages. And the situation is very, very dire. And it doesn't seem, it's gotten into the third week, and it doesn't seem to be relenting at all, either party. And they keep continuing fighting. We heard, in addition, that both parties have received, or at least one party, that is the Rapid Response Forces, have received munitions via Libya and some form of rearmament and refreshing their armies, and with absolutely no sign of the situation improving in any way or case. In the meantime, we have three main clusters of refugees, one at the border to South Sudan, one at the border of Egypt, and one at the Red Sea area by the town of Port Sudan, where people are trying to escape the conflict by going across the border. Now, the international community and humanitarian aid have been completely absent, and it is very chaotic. Now, in these three clusters, the situation is, there is no fight. Very easily, there could be humanitarian aid coming.
Consequences of this conflict if it is not stopped. Now, what are your biggest concerns, especially with the failure of the ceasefire agreements?
My biggest concern is that it will spill over in more than one way. First of all, Sudan is very important economically to a number of neighboring countries, including South Sudan. South Sudan receives a lot of daily goods from North Sudan, which means that the markets in South Sudan are going to be impoverished. There is a huge trade between Egypt and the Sudan, and Egyptian big trucks and vehicles carry all kinds of meat and vegetables and so on a daily basis to Egypt. There is also a very frequent food and meat to Saudi Arabia. These countries have lived on these three countries, neighboring countries, are very much dependent on commercial exchange with the Sudan. From a food security point of view, I think we will have a crisis in the region because of lack of food shortages from the Sudan. Remember, Sudan is a huge agricultural country, and in terms of livestock as well.
Well, even though you foresee a huge crisis in those regions, hopefully something happens, that a ceasefire would be ahead to once and for all, and the end of the war will be seen. Well, Majdullin El Tahir, many thanks, expert on Sudanese geopolitics and advocate for democracy and human rights. Thank you very much for your insight. All right, and in sports, FIFA President Gianni Infantino has threatened a television blackout of this year's Women's World Cup in major European countries unless broadcasters improve their offers for rights. With the World Cup to start on July the 20th and end August 20, Infantino says if the offers continue to be unfair, the federation will be forced to not broadcast the FIFA Women's World Cup into the Big Five European countries.
Gave us all over the world a bit of a halt in what we are doing, but we continued to develop it. We created a COVID relief plan worth $1.5 billion. a big part of which went into all our 211 countries which are members of FIFA, specifically targeted to keeping women's football alive. Now, we had a very successful, to come back to what we did for women's football, a very successful Women's World Cup in France in 2019, with 1.2 billion viewers all over the world, more than 1 million in the stadiums. This shows the magnitude of this event. That the next World Cup in Australia and New Zealand will be even bigger than that, with 2 billion viewers. We had 172 countries participating in the qualifiers of this World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. And the last World Cup in France had only 143 countries participating. Now it was 172, and today we have 188 countries ranked in the FIFA ranking. So it is moving, it is getting bigger, it is getting more impactful, and events like this one are certainly helping in this direction.
Well, that's all in our bulletin this evening. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Simisola Atigun. Bye for now.